I never expected my colleague to ruin my life, but the night I saw what was on his screen, I realized one truth. Nothing in that office was what it seemed, and from that moment, I stopped feeling safe. He wasn't just a coworker. He was someone I thought I could trust. Someone whose laughter at the coffee machine felt genuine, whose advice in meetings seemed harmless, helpful. But trust is the sharpest knife, and I had handed it to him willingly. The first report looked perfect. Too perfect. Every number aligned, every figure balanced. Perfection, I've learned, is always the loudest lie. He waved it off, smiling as though everything were normal. "Clerical noise," he said. "Don't worry about it. Numbers don't lie, people do." I tried to convince myself it was nothing at first. Mistakes happen. Everyone slips once in a while. But that night, as I walked past his office on my way to grab a file I had forgotten, the soft glow from his laptop caught my eye. The room was dim except for the cold light reflecting off his face. Rows of numbers scrolled across the screen. At first I thought they were just spreadsheets, harmless, but then I saw them vanish, line by line, replaced by new entries I didn't recognize. I froze in the doorway, and then he noticed. His hand slammed the laptop shut, and the sound cracked through the silent office like a gunshot. He smiled, but not like the coworker I had known. The smile was hollow, calculated, menacing. It was a warning, not a greeting. The next morning, the office felt different. Colleagues whispered in half sentences. They cast glances I couldn't decipher, and I couldn't shake the thought. Had he told them something about me? Had he poisoned their minds while I slept? I kept quiet, but I kept digging. Transfer logs, internal audits, emails, and then his name, his signature. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. But mistakes don't move money into secret accounts. Mistakes don't leave trails this deliberate. I confronted him once. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Why do all these transfers trace back to you?" He didn't flinch, didn't deny it. He just smiled that same hollow, knowing smile. "You think you're smarter than you are," he said. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't scared of me. He was warning me. The following day, an envelope appeared on my desk. No name, no handwriting. Just 3 words typed on plain white paper. "He knows too." I stared until the letters blurred. Who knew? And why were they warning me? When I looked up, he was already there, across the room, watching. Eyes locked on mine. The smirk on his face felt like a trap snapping shut. That night, the parking lot was empty. The flickering lights buzzed overhead like insects trapped in glass. On my windshield, another note. Short, cold. 2 words, "Stop digging." My hands shook as I held it. I knew 2 things. 1, this was real. 2, I was in danger. The next morning, he didn't avoid me. He hovered. Coffee machine, break room, elevator, everywhere. "Rough night?" His voice casual. But his eyes, they weren't asking. They were checking. I forced a laugh. "Just tired," I said. But inside my thoughts screamed, "He knows I found the note." Days passed. And with each day, the tension grew. The office seemed alive with whispers. Screens flickered when he walked by. Phone calls went unanswered. And I began noticing small things, subtle, almost invisible signs of surveillance. A reflection in a window, a shadow at the edge of my vision. Someone or something was always there, watching. I tried to talk to friends outside work, tried to convince them that something was wrong. But how do you explain fear when it wears the face of someone you trust? How do you explain paranoia when the proof glows softly on a laptop screen at midnight? I started sleeping poorly. My dreams were filled with numbers, scrolling endlessly across dark voids. Faces blurred into spreadsheets, hands reaching, touching, deleting. I woke in a cold sweat, certain he had been there, certain he was still smiling. One evening, determined to catch him, I stayed late. Hiding behind a pillar, I watched as he returned to the office. The glow of the laptop illuminated his face again. Rows of numbers danced as if mocking me, and then the screen went black. He hadn't noticed me, or maybe he had, and this was part of the game. I felt the weight of his gaze in the shadows. The silence pressed on me like water, and then, almost imperceptibly, a flicker of movement. Another note, this time slipped under the door. "You can't hide." Fear is sharp. Fear is patient. Fear waits while you try to convince yourself it's imagination, and I could no longer pretend. I began noticing the details I had missed before. The way his chair always faced my cubicle, even when empty. The subtle changes in his voice when others spoke. The tiny tremor in his fingers, not from fatigue, but from control. He was always balancing, always calculating, always watching. I started documenting everything. Every glance, every interaction, every envelope, every note. I needed proof. Or at least, I needed something to hold on to if this was all spiraling into something I couldn't control. And then, one night, I made a mistake. I turned around, and he was standing there, silent, close enough that I could feel the cold air from his presence. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just smiled that same hollow smile, the one that had haunted my waking hours for a week straight. "You're learning," he whispered. Or maybe it was a statement. Or maybe it was a threat. I couldn't tell. From that moment, everything changed. Every step I took, every move I made, I felt him behind me, watching, calculating, waiting for me to slip. I realized then, I wasn't just fighting him. I was fighting the office, the rules, the system that allowed someone like him to hide in plain sight. And the more I dug, the deeper the trap became. This was no longer about numbers, or mistakes, or money. This was about survival. And I was already late. The morning after the last note, the office felt different, like it had shifted overnight, as if the walls themselves had become sentient. Every glance from a coworker, every murmur in the hallway felt like a trap set to catch me in the act of discovery. I told myself it was paranoia. I tried to ignore it. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining it. The day began with the usual hum of fluorescent lights and printer whirs. But there was something off. The coffee machine clicked too often. The copier jammed at precise moments. The elevator lingered on floors it didn't need to stop at. Small things, insignificant things. Or so I told myself. But then came the emails. They weren't from anyone I knew. No sender, no subject. Just a single line typed in sharp. Capital letters, "You're too close." I stared at the screen until my eyes ached. My hands shook as I shut the laptop, almost throwing it across the room. My chest hammered. I couldn't tell if the messages were meant to scare me or if they were confirmation, proof that my digging was being noticed. I started looking over my shoulder constantly. Even in the hallways, I felt it. Someone or something tracking my every step. That afternoon, I found a USB drive slipped under my keyboard. No envelope this time, no note. Just a small, unmarked black stick. I debated plugging it in, my rational mind warring with the thrill of discovery. Curiosity won. The screen flickered and a single file opened. Hundreds of names, hundreds of numbers, all linked in ways I couldn't immediately comprehend. Money moving across accounts, off the books, hidden from audits. My colleague's name appeared again. And then something worse, mine. I swallowed hard. There it was, my name, my access credentials. My digital footprint traced across a network I didn't even know existed. Someone had made me part of this, had set me up. I realized then I had been wrong all along. He wasn't just hiding his crimes. He was grooming me, training me, testing me, implicating me without my knowledge. The office became a battlefield. Every conversation, every meeting, every glance was a test. I couldn't trust anyone, not even those I had thought were innocent. I began documenting everything, obsessively. Photos of the notes, screenshots of the emails, times, dates, shadows that moved where they shouldn't. Every detail mattered. Every detail could save me or condemn me. Late one night, I returned to the office under the pretense of catching up on work. The lights were dim, the hum of electronics louder than usual. I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. A figure crouched behind a partition, watching me. I froze. It was him. He didn't move. He didn't speak, just observed. The hollow smile, the same hollow smile that had haunted my dreams. "You think you understand," he said finally. "But understanding is dangerous." I felt my knees weaken. My pulse raced. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He leaned closer. The faint smell of coffee and something metallic clung to him. "I want nothing, yet everything. You're part of this now, whether you like it or not." I wanted to back away, to run. But the office was empty, the doors locked, the lights dimmed. There was no escape. For the next week, the notes escalated. Shorter, colder. "Don't look. Don't touch. Don't think." The last one arrived with a new addition, a photograph. My own reflection, taken from behind a glass wall, cropped perfectly to show me typing at my desk. The surveillance was intimate, personal, designed to unnerve me, to show me that nothing I did went unnoticed. Sleep became impossible. Every sound in my apartment, the creak of the radiator, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a dog, felt like him. Watching, waiting, smiling. I tried to fight back, tracing IP addresses, checking security logs, searching for anomalies in the system. Every lead ended in a dead end. Every anomaly traced back to him. He was everywhere. Then came the confrontation I had been dreading. I arrived early one morning, determined to catch him off guard. The office was quiet, too quiet, and then I saw it. My laptop was already open. Emails I hadn't seen yet scrolled across the screen. Names I didn't recognize, places I didn't know, transactions I couldn't comprehend. And there, standing behind me, was him. Silent, waiting, smiling. "You think this is about money?" he whispered. "It's never about money. It's about control. It's about who decides who can breathe and who can't." I felt my stomach turn. His words were poison, infecting every thought I had. I realized I wasn't just fighting him anymore. I was fighting the system he had built around me. A labyrinth of deceit, surveillance, and manipulation I couldn't see in its entirety. Then the first real threat came. Not a note, not an email, not a photograph, but a person. Someone new, someone who didn't speak, just watched. Sat across from me during lunch. Walked past my desk, slow, deliberate. Their eyes locked with mine. And I knew he had allies. From that moment, I understood the truth. He wasn't working alone. I was surrounded by ghosts in the office. Everyone smiled. Everyone whispered. Everyone watched. And I was alone. By the time I left that night, I was exhausted, terrified. My mind replayed every interaction, every glance, every smile. And then I saw it, my car, scratched along the side, a message etched into the paint. Stop. Fear isn't just a feeling. Fear is a predator. It stalks. It waits. It sharpens itself against your nerves. And I was its prey. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. But logic had left the building. Reality had warped. The office, my colleagues, my life, all threads in a tapestry I couldn't read. And I realized finally that I was trapped. Trapped in a game I didn't know the rules to. Trapped in an office where every shadow was alive. Trapped in a nightmare that had only just begun. The night my car was marked, I knew I had crossed a line. There was no turning back. Sleep was impossible. Every shadow in my apartment felt alive. Every creak and hum a whisper of warning. The city outside my window seemed to pulse with the same malicious energy I felt in the office. I was being hunted. And I didn't know by how many. The next morning I arrived early, trying to act normal. The office lights flickered faintly, as if warning me, as if the walls themselves were complicit in the trap. My colleague was already there, sitting at his desk, coffee in hand, eyes casually scanning the room. That hollow smile, it never left. "Good morning," he said. But there was no warmth, no familiarity, only calculation. I forced a nod, walked past, keeping my head down. Every step was measured. Every glance calculated. I needed to survive this day without giving him a reason to notice my panic. By mid-morning, I realized the office had changed again. Desks rearranged, chairs slightly angled toward mine, screens angled just enough to catch reflections. I wasn't just being watched. I was being studied. Every action logged, every word analyzed. At my desk, a new envelope waited. Thin, plain, no name. 2 words, typed in crisp letters, "You're next." My fingers trembled as I picked it up. My mind screamed, and yet, a part of me was curious. I had to know what game I was playing, even if it meant stepping further into the trap. I began noticing things I hadn't before. Little anomalies. An email sent and deleted before I could read it. A shadow at the edge of my vision when I thought I was alone. A subtle change in the air conditioning vents, as if someone had passed by. By the afternoon, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started logging everything. Every shadow, every email, every whisper. My notes filled pages, my desk a chaotic mess of scribbles, screenshots and printouts. Then came the first direct encounter with one of his allies. I had gone to the break room for coffee. He wasn't there, but someone else was, tall, silent, watching. Every time I tried to speak, they remained motionless, eyes locked on mine, and then they smiled. Not a friendly smile, but a mirror of his, a hollow, cold warning. "You shouldn't be here," the person said. Their voice was calm, almost indifferent, yet it carried the weight of a threat I couldn't ignore. I left without a word. My heart pounded in my chest, every step echoing in the silent office. I realized then that he had built an army, quietly, invisibly, and I was the target. That night, I returned to my apartment, trying to think, trying to plan. My laptop had a new email waiting. No sender, Subject line blank. The message inside was simple. Every move watched. Panic rose like bile in my throat. I had no idea how far this network extended, or how many of my colleagues were involved. I felt my life closing in around me. Over the next few days, the attacks escalated. Notes on my chair. Items on my desk rearranged in subtle ways. Phone calls with silence at the other end. And then came the photographs. Not of me at work, not of transactions. Of my home, my apartment, the entrance, my windows. Someone had been inside. The realization hit me like a punch. I wasn't just being hunted at work. I was being watched at home. Every move, every step, every breath was observed. I started sleeping in short bursts, never fully closing my eyes. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow felt like it had a life of its own. And then, one night, he appeared in my apartment. Not physically, not yet, but the screen of my laptop lit up with a video feed. My own living room as I slept. And there he was, standing in the doorway, smiling, just like always. "You're learning," he said. The words chilled me to the bone. But learning isn't enough. You need to adapt. I realized then that he wasn't just controlling information. He was controlling me. My actions, my thoughts, my fears. I was a puppet in a game I didn't understand, and he held the strings. Desperation set in. I had to fight back. I had to find a weakness. And yet every attempt I made seemed to lead me deeper into his trap. I tried contacting friends, family, anyone I thought I could trust. Every call ended with silence. Every email unanswered. I began to suspect he had eyes everywhere, ears in every conversation. The office became a labyrinth. Hallways twisted in my mind. Desks and cubicles became obstacles in a maze designed to confuse me. I started noticing patterns. Hidden codes in the way chairs were arranged. Papers stacked, screens left open. Each day was a puzzle, each encounter a test. One afternoon, I decided to follow him after work. Keep distance, observe. He walked calmly to the parking garage, as if he owned every shadow, every flicker of light. And then he disappeared, into thin air, or so it seemed. I spent hours searching. The garage empty. No car, no shadow, no hint of where he went, and yet I felt him, watching, waiting, smiling. By the time I returned home, the note was there again. Placed on my front door, simple, cold, one word, alone. The message was clear. He had crossed the line into my personal life, and now he wanted me to feel the full weight of isolation, fear, and control. I realized I couldn't trust anyone. Not friends, not family, not the office. I was entirely alone, trapped in a world where one wrong move meant disaster. But the fight inside me had only just begun. I began planning. Small steps. Observing, watching, documenting, waiting. For the moment he slipped, the moment his mask faltered. And I knew it would come. Everyone slips eventually. Everyone leaves a trace. But until then, I was prey. The word on my front door, alone, haunted me for days. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. Every shadow, every noise in my apartment became a warning, a threat. My thoughts raced, spiraling into a maze of paranoia and fear. But somewhere in the chaos, determination sparked. If I was a pawn in his game, I would learn the rules. I would find a way to fight back. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Too early. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as if conspiring against me. I knew he would notice. Of course he would. He always did. I started by documenting everything. Every note, every photograph, every interaction. I printed logs, mapped out patterns, traced emails, and cross-referenced every anomaly I had noticed over the past weeks. My desk was a battlefield of scribbles, folders and laptop screens filled with code, numbers and timelines. Hours passed. The office slowly filled with coworkers, each one carefully performing their roles. Smiles, small talk, pretend laughter, and yet I noticed subtle signs again. The angle of a chair, the flicker of a screen, the way someone glanced at a reflection. It was all part of the web he had spun. I decided it was time for a test. I planted a small, traceable signal on one of his computers, a subtle marker in the system I could monitor remotely. If he moved funds, manipulated files, or tampered with any data, I would know. And if he noticed, well, at least I'd have proof. Hours passed. Nothing. The quiet hum of the office became unbearable, the waiting excruciating. And then, in the late afternoon, my marker triggered. It was him. I watched as rows of data disappeared and reappeared on his screen. Money, files, information, all vanishing into places I couldn't trace. My heart pounded. This was real. Every fear I had been feeling, every note, every photograph, every moment of terror, it was all real. And then he stopped, turned toward my cubicle. Our eyes met. That hollow smile again. "You're bold," he said. "Or foolish. I can't tell the difference anymore." I swallowed hard, keeping my expression neutral. My mind raced, plotting, calculating. Every move had to be precise, every word controlled. By evening, the office emptied. I stayed behind under the guise of finishing reports. I needed to see how far he would go, what limits existed in his game. I watched him. Every movement, every keystroke, every glance. And then, as if sensing my attention, he left the office, but not in the normal way. Not through the doors. He seemed to vanish, disappearing into the building's shadows, leaving no trace. When I tried to follow, I realized the office itself had been modified. Hallways I had walked a dozen times now twisted strangely. Cubicles shifted. Nothing was as it had been. Every exit, every path, seemed designed to confuse me, to trap me. By the time I returned home, another envelope awaited me. This one was thicker. Inside, a USB drive. I hesitated, but curiosity and desperation won. I plugged it into my laptop. The files inside were shocking. Video footage of the office, hidden cameras I had never seen. Every desk, every hallway, every door. He had been watching me, documenting me, anticipating my moves, predicting my reactions. And then I saw myself. A looped video of me leaving my apartment, arriving at work, walking through hallways, interacting with coworkers. It was perfect. Too perfect. He knew me better than I knew myself. Panic surged, but I pushed it down. I needed to focus. I needed a plan. I began cross-referencing the footage with my notes, looking for anomalies, mistakes, anything he had overlooked. Every system has a flaw. Every plan has a hole. He was meticulous, but he was human. Days turned into nights. I slept in bursts, ate sporadically, obsessed over patterns and possibilities. I realized then the truth. I couldn't confront him directly. Not yet. I needed leverage, proof, something tangible that could bring him down without exposing myself. And then the first strike came, not from him, but from one of his allies. I had left my office briefly to use the restroom. When I returned, my chair was tipped back, papers scattered, a note on my keyboard. "Watch your back." It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a statement. He was closing in, tightening the web around me, reminding me that every move I made was under scrutiny. That night I tried to rest, but sleep didn't come. Every creak of the building, every flicker of the streetlights outside my window, every distant sound felt like him, watching, smiling, waiting. I realized the office, my home, the city itself, none of it was safe. He had extended his reach everywhere I went, and the network he had built, the allies he commanded, the surveillance he maintained, it was larger, more complex, more terrifying than I had imagined. And yet, I was ready to fight, ready to uncover the truth, ready to make my first move in a game that had no rules. But I had to be careful. Every step wrong, every miscalculation, and he would know. And this time the consequences wouldn't be just fear. They would be real. I had to find him. I had to understand him. I had to strike first. Because if I didn't, I would disappear. The first strike wasn't meant to be obvious. It had to be subtle, surgical. I began by isolating small pieces of data, emails, file logs, transaction anomalies, and cross-referencing them with patterns I had noticed in the office. Every keystroke he made left a trace, however faint. Every move a breadcrumb. I only had to follow it carefully. For days I watched, I waited. Every routine of his was predictable, too predictable. He left the same marks in the system, the same gaps in monitoring, the same pauses in surveillance. And I began mapping them. Late one night, I returned to the office, pretending I had forgotten files. The building was silent, empty. Safe, I thought. Safe enough to plant my first countermeasure. I slipped a small, encrypted device into the network hub. A simple script designed to copy every new file he touched, every email he sent, every movement he made on the system. If he noticed, I would have seconds to react. If he didn't, I'd finally have proof. Hours passed. The office remained silent. My heart pounded. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, every flicker of the lights a warning. And then I saw it, a movement in the corner. He was there, watching, waiting, smiling. "You're brave," he said, voice soft but dripping with menace. Or foolish. Perhaps both. I swallowed hard. "I'm learning," I whispered. Not the truth, not yet. He stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. But I knew. He had seen something. Knew that I was testing him. Testing his system. Testing his patience. The next morning, the office felt different again. Every glance from a coworker, every laugh, every casual conversation felt rehearsed, controlled, part of the network, part of the trap. But I had something he didn't know I had: leverage. Over the next few days, I reviewed the data my countermeasure had collected. Patterns emerged. Hidden accounts, alias names, shell corporations, all linked back to him. The scope of his operation was staggering. And worse, it implicated others I trusted, managers, colleagues, even IT personnel. He hadn't just been careful. He had been meticulous. And the web extended further than I could have imagined. That night, I received a note at my apartment. One word, simple, cold stop. But I didn't. I began planning my next move. I would expose him. Not publicly, not yet, but I needed to corner him, to prove to myself that I could. I set up small tests, emails with false information, fake transactions. I watched the network, waiting for him to react. And he did. Every time. Predictably, reassuringly. I could anticipate his moves now. Then came the breakthrough. One of his aliases slipped. A minor error in coding, a slight delay in a file transfer, a timestamp misalignment. It was enough. Enough to track him. Enough to begin unraveling his control. I followed the trail, careful, methodical. Each step brought me closer. And the closer I got, the more desperate he became. The first confrontation came unexpectedly. I had been monitoring a transaction when he appeared on the security feed of my office. Not physically, but digitally. A camera feed I hadn't known existed. He was in the server room, smiling at the camera. "You think you can play this game?" he whispered. "But you're still my piece." I clenched my fists. "Not anymore," I replied silently. The next day, a message appeared on my computer. Not a note, not an email. A live chat. Simple text, "I see you, always." I realized then that the game had escalated. No longer just threats. No longer just surveillance. It was active manipulation. Every move I made, every decision, every thought had been observed, anticipated, and used against me. But now I had leverage, and I intended to use it. I began coordinating, carefully. Small disclosures, planted evidence, subtle tests, watching his reactions, measuring his responses. Every error he made, I noted. Every hesitation, every flash of doubt, I recorded. The tension was suffocating. The office became a labyrinth again, each hallway a threat, each desk a trap. But this time I wasn't the hunted. I was the hunter. Late one night, I watched him leave the office. The camera feed showed him walking down the corridor, alone. I followed the digital trail, heart hammering, mind sharp. Each step brought me closer to him, closer to the truth. And then I found it. The server, hidden behind layers of security, buried in code, almost invisible. My heart raced as I accessed it. Files, accounts, surveillance footage, hidden correspondences, all linked back to him. I had him. But the feeling of victory was fleeting. I realized how dangerous this was. One wrong move, one misstep, and he would know I was inside his system. And then, the stakes wouldn't be digital. They would be real. I began planning the extraction of the data, carefully, methodically, each step calculated. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning, because he wouldn't let me go without a fight. And when he fought, he didn't play fair. The moment I accessed the hidden server, I knew the game had changed. No longer just subtle manipulations, notes, or surveillance. Now the stakes were real. Every move I made could provoke a violent reaction. Every file I downloaded, every pattern I uncovered, could trigger him into action. I worked fast, methodical, deliberate. My eyes burned from staring at the screens. My fingers cramped from typing. The office was silent. Too silent. The hum of the air conditioner felt like a predator. The flicker of the fluorescent lights a warning. Hours passed and I collected every file, every video, every document that linked him to his operations. Evidence, proof, a lifeline. And then I froze. I wasn't alone. A shadow shifted in the corner of the room. He had returned. Not through the front door, not through the hallways, but there he was, watching, silent, smiling that same hollow smile. "You're persistent," he said, voice low and calm. "But persistence can be fatal," I kept typing. Every keystroke calculated, every movement deliberate. I couldn't let him see fear. "Not yet. You think you understand what you're dealing with?" He continued, stepping closer. But this is bigger than you can imagine. I swallowed hard, keeping my expression neutral. I know enough, I whispered. He laughed. A low, chilling sound. Enough to die for, perhaps? We'll see. The lights flickered. For a moment, I thought I had imagined him. But the faint reflection in the glass told me otherwise. He was real, present, dangerous. Over the next few days, the office transformed into a battlefield. My coworkers no longer smiled. They watched. They whispered. Subtle glances, hushed tones. Every interaction became a threat. Every movement a calculated test. I began noticing patterns in the surveillance, small anomalies. Missed shadows, reflections that didn't match reality, screens flickering where they shouldn't. He had grown overconfident, careless, and I knew it was time. I planned a counterstrike, subtle, surgical, a digital trap, designed to expose his network without alerting him immediately. I planted false files, disguised them as mistakes, and watched for reactions. The first response was immediate. An email from an alias I hadn't traced yet. Subject, I see you. The content, a single sentence. Stop now or else. I smiled. He had taken the bait. Days later, the first real confrontation occurred not digital, but physical. I returned to my office late at night, only to find the floor covered with notes, photographs, and printouts. My desk had been rifled through. My laptop moved, and in the center of it all, a small, unmarked envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside, a single card. Printed in bold letters, "You think you're safe? Think again." Fear surged, but I held it down. This was escalation, a challenge, and I accepted it. The next morning, I noticed subtle changes. My coffee cup slightly tilted. My chair angled differently. Screens at angles they hadn't been before. He was everywhere. Watching, waiting, smiling. I knew then that he had grown desperate. He was rattled. And desperation makes monsters reckless. I continued to monitor his network, analyzing patterns, anticipating his next moves. Every file I planted, every trace I left, I tracked. And slowly, methodically, I began seeing cracks, errors, small oversights, careless patterns that revealed his arrogance. One night, while reviewing surveillance footage, I saw him meet with someone outside the office, a figure cloaked in shadows, face hidden, exchanging a small device. My heart raced. Allies, he had allies, and they were willing to cross lines I couldn't yet imagine. I began planning again. Not just defense, not just observation. I needed to act, to expose, to fight. The first step was digital. A virus, disguised as an update, inserted into his network. It would remain dormant until I triggered it, revealing everything he had hidden. But the real danger came when he discovered the first traces of my counterstrike. Notes began appearing in the office. Threats, commands, warnings. My personal life invaded once more. One night, I returned to find my apartment door ajar. Inside, everything was untouched. But a single note lay on my bed. "Don't think you're alone." My pulse quickened. He had crossed boundaries again. He was close, watching, always. I knew I had to escalate, carefully. Every move now had to be precise. Every step calculated. He wasn't just dangerous. He was brilliant. But brilliance can be undone by overconfidence. I prepared, monitored, waited. And then, the opportunity appeared. A minor flaw in his schedule, a window where he was alone, unaware. I knew I had to act. Carefully, quietly, without revealing myself too soon. Because if he sensed my intentions, I would pay the price. The office, the city, my life, all had become part of a chessboard. And the first real move had to be flawless, because the next strike would change everything. The window appeared unexpectedly, a small lapse in his otherwise flawless control. I had monitored him for weeks, studied his routines, mapped every shadow and anomaly, and now finally, an opening. The office was silent, empty, perfect. I slipped inside, moving with care, avoiding the cameras I knew existed but hadn't yet been triggered. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. I approached the server room. My heart pounded. Sweat prickled my back. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, deadly dangerous. But I couldn't stop. I had to act. I connected the device I had prepared, a complex digital tool designed to copy and reveal every hidden file, every secret account, every covert operation he had built over years. The device hummed quietly, silent, invisible. And then, the first reaction. Screens flickered. Alarms in the system triggered silently, in ways only I could monitor. He had noticed something. Of course he had. And then he appeared. Not in the shadows, not through a hidden doorway, but on the screen, a live feed from one of the cameras I hadn't spotted. His hollow smile filled the monitor. "You think you can uncover me?" he whispered. "Do you understand what you've started?" I kept my hands steady. I'm done hiding. For hours I worked. The files poured in, revealing everything. Secret accounts, hidden correspondence, bribery, surveillance, manipulation. Names I had trusted manipulated into loyalty. Evidence of crime spanning years. The scale was staggering. And then, something worse. My own name appeared in the documents. Connections I hadn't imagined. Traces of activity designed to implicate me, to make me look like part of the operation. He had planned for every possibility, every contingency, and now I held proof in my hands that could destroy him and protect myself. But as I downloaded the files, the tension in the office grew. The lights flickered. A shadow moved across the far wall. I wasn't alone. He had anticipated this. Anticipated me accessing the server. And he was ready. "You've taken something that doesn't belong to you." His voice echoed through the speakers. "And now you'll pay the price." Suddenly alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Doors locked automatically. He had triggered the security override. I was trapped. I realized then that this wasn't just about digital control. He had manipulated every system in the office, every protocol, every sensor. I had walked into a cage. I searched for an escape, a hidden exit, a flaw. And then I remembered the minor anomaly I had spotted days before. A vent, slightly misaligned. I crawled through it, every movement slow, deliberate. The metal scraped against my hands. My chest burned. But I made it to the corridor beyond. He was waiting. Not physically, but digitally. Cameras, screens, alarms, all monitoring me. Every corridor, every doorway, every step calculated. I realized the truth. He had built the office itself into a trap. A surveillance labyrinth designed to control, manipulate, and trap anyone who dared oppose him. I ran, twisting through hallways, ducking behind cubicles, avoiding cameras, following my mental map of the building. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light was a threat. And then I found the security office. Rows of monitors, each displaying a corner of the office. And in one of the feeds, he was there, watching, smiling, calm. I had the files. I had the proof. But getting out with them alive was the real challenge. I disabled cameras, triggered silent alarms to create chaos, and slipped through corridors, my heart hammering. Each step closer to the exit was a gamble. Each breath a victory. Finally, I reached the loading bay. The door was locked electronically. I punched in an override code I had discovered in the server files. The door clicked open. Fresh air hit me like a wave. Relief surged. But it was fleeting, because I knew he would be waiting. Outside I paused. The street was empty, dark, silent. The city seemed unaware of the war. I had just fought within the office walls, but I knew he was still out there, still watching, still planning his next move. I had struck first. I had won the first battle, but the war was far from over, and as I walked into the night, clutching the evidence that could destroy him, I realized one truth. He would come for me. He always did. The night air was heavy as I left the office. Evidence clutched tightly in my hands. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. By morning, subtle signs of retaliation had already begun. My car tires were slashed. My mailbox emptied of letters, but replaced with small, unnerving messages. Each one a reminder. He was watching. He knew where I was. He always knew. Emails arrived on my phone, each more aggressive than the last. "You should have stopped." I ignored them. I had to. But fear crept into every corner of my mind, and sleep became impossible. Every creak of my apartment, every shadow cast by the streetlight outside, felt like his eyes. I realized he wasn't just a threat. He had become omnipresent. The next day at work, things escalated further. Screens I hadn't touched were modified. Data I had thought secure was tampered with. My files were now being corrupted slowly, subtle enough that I might not notice until it was too late. He was controlling everything. Every system, every protocol, every interaction. I couldn't fight him head on, not yet. I had to be clever. I started creating decoys, false traces to mislead him. while simultaneously working to secure the files I had stolen. Every action was calculated, every move deliberate. But the first physical retaliation was worse than I imagined. I returned home one evening to find my apartment ransacked. The note I found this time wasn't cryptic. It was direct. You think you're safe? Think again, every drawer open, every paper shuffled. Nothing stolen. Nothing missing. Just a demonstration. A message. He could get to me anytime. Panic surged, but I forced it down. I had to keep my head clear. Fear would only play into his hands. I decided to act preemptively. I began tracing his network more aggressively, inserting monitoring scripts into areas I hadn't yet explored. I had to anticipate his next move. And then it happened. Knock at my door, sharp, deliberate. My heart skipped. I froze, calculating. Friends? Neighbors? Or him? I didn't answer. I watched through the peephole. No one there. Only shadows. And then the note slid under the door. We're everywhere. The digital retaliation followed almost immediately. My systems were breached, files duplicated, disguised, manipulated. He was countering every move I made, predicting, adjusting, adapting. I realized then the terrifying truth. I wasn't just fighting him. I was fighting an entire network. Allies in the office, outside, anywhere he had influence. I couldn't trust anyone. Over the next few days, he escalated further. Cameras outside my apartment, monitors tracking my phone signals. Even my car seemed compromised. Every attempt at normalcy shattered, yet I kept pushing. I discovered a small vulnerability, a gap in his system. He hadn't patched. A minor flaw, but enough to gather intelligence without him noticing. Using this, I tracked movements, communications, and patterns that revealed not just his operations, but also the structure of his network. I realized his reach was enormous. Offices, homes, businesses, all connected to him. But like all empires, there were cracks, and I was starting to find them. The night of my first active retaliation, I prepared carefully. I triggered a controlled leak of his falsified transactions, enough to create internal chaos. A silent alarm for me, but a visible one for him. Within hours, I saw the response. Panic, confusion, small errors, subtle mistakes, signs that he was reacting to my move. But retaliation came fast. My apartment was again compromised. A shadow outside, a camera in my window, a note attached to the door handle. You're out of time. I realized something critical. He was no longer playing, no longer testing, no longer sending warnings. He was escalating into violence, intimidation, domination, and I couldn't stop. Because I now held the key to unraveling him entirely. The evidence in my possession could destroy him, but only if I survived long enough to act. The week that followed was a chess game. Every move calculated, every counter-strike measured. My apartment became a fortress of surveillance. My devices monitored, my interactions precise. Every false move could be fatal. And then the breakthrough came. I intercepted a communication between him and an ally. A plan. A meeting, a flaw, a vulnerability. I had a choice. Wait. Continue gathering evidence or strike immediately. Time was running out. I decided to act. And as I prepared to confront the core of his operation, I knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't go down quietly. And the next move would change everything. The vulnerability I had uncovered was small, almost insignificant, but it was enough. Weeks of planning, observation, and digital warfare had led me here. The files I had collected, the minor flaws I had discovered, the patterns I had traced, they all converged into a single dangerous plan. I prepared carefully. Every device, every trace, every movement had to be precise. One misstep and he would know. One slip, and the consequences would be fatal. I began by inserting a controlled piece of data into his system, trap disguised as a minor error, something he would notice but underestimate. My fingers shook slightly as I uploaded it, but the screen confirmed it had been accepted. Then I waited. Hours passed. The office hummed with life, unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows. I monitored every screen, every feed, every movement, and finally the reaction appeared. Errors, anomalies, small glitches that were impossible to ignore. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind as he attempted to trace the source. And in those moments, I realized he had underestimated me. The digital battle escalated quickly. I inserted scripts, false leads, and data distortions. He countered, reacting swiftly, but I anticipated each move. Every step he took revealed more of his network. more of his operations, more of his allies. But the danger wasn't just digital anymore. That night, a shadow appeared outside my apartment. Not just a threat, but a message. I realized then that he had realized my move. He was retaliating, preparing to escalate the stakes even further. I had no choice. I had to move faster, smarter. I began tracking him physically, anticipating where he would strike next. Each surveillance feed, each digital trace, each minor flaw in his planning became my map. Days turned into nights. Every step, every interaction, every heartbeat was measured. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own instincts at times. Then came the first confrontation. I lured him into a false sense of control. A decoy. A minor leak I had prepared as bait. He took it, predictably. And in that moment, I struck, not physically, but strategically. I exposed part of his network, sending traces to contacts I had previously vetted, ensuring the evidence couldn't be erased. Panic, confusion, chaos. For the first time, I saw cracks in his armor, mistakes, hesitations, flaws, and I exploited them. Every digital move, every subtle push, forced him to react, and each reaction revealed more. But he wasn't defeated. Far from it. He retaliated fiercely. Files deleted. Systems compromised. Personal threats intensified. Surveillance cameras repositioned. Every move I made, he countered. The game escalated into a war of nerves, digital mastery, and psychological manipulation. And then came the breakthrough. One of his allies, previously hidden, slipped. A minor communication, a small misstep. I traced it, analyzed it, and discovered the core of his operations. A location, a hub, the source of his power. I realized then that to end this, to protect myself, I had to confront him directly. The evidence I had wasn't enough. The network, the allies, the manipulation, it all stemmed from him. The plan formed in my mind, carefully, strategically. I would strike at the hub, not recklessly, not alone, but decisively. The files, the patterns, the flaws, they gave me the leverage I needed. The next move would be dangerous, lethal even, but it was necessary. And as I prepared to move, I realized one truth. He had always known I would come for him. Every step I had taken, every move I had made, had been anticipated. But this time, I would be the one controlling the game, because every empire falls from within. And tonight, the first domino would drop. The hub was quiet, almost eerily so. Every step I took was calculated, measured. The files I carried, the evidence I had amassed, every detail of his network, all of it led me here. The final confrontation. I paused at the entrance. Shadows stretched along the walls, flickering from the faint overhead lights. The air felt heavy, electric, charged with anticipation. I knew he was watching, waiting, ready to strike. And then he appeared. Not from the shadows, not behind a door, but at the center of the room, calm, smiling, that hollow, calculating smile that had haunted me for weeks. "You came," he said, voice low, deliberate. "I knew you would." I didn't respond. Every instinct screamed at me to move carefully, to watch, to wait. Every step he had anticipated, every reaction planned. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into this game weeks ago. I was ready. "You think you can destroy me?" He continued. "Everything I built, everything I control, it's untouchable." I held up a small drive, my trump card. Not anymore. For hours we circled each other, not physically but mentally, strategically. Every word a test, every pause a threat. He tried to manipulate, to intimidate, to break me. But I had studied him, tracked him, and now I knew his patterns. His arrogance was his weakness. I connected the drive to the main terminal. Files uploaded, evidence displayed, hidden accounts exposed, surveillance networks revealed. Every alias, every secret, every ally, all traced back to him. Panic flashed in his eyes. For the first time, I saw a crack in his facade. "You think this is enough?" he hissed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." I didn't flinch. I triggered the final sequence. Every falsified transaction reversed. Every secret account flagged. Every trace sent to authorities. The network he had built collapsed like a house of cards. And then he realized it. No more control, no more shadows, no more manipulations. I watched as the empire he had built, meticulously over years, crumbled in front of him. The screens that had once monitored everything now displayed chaos. His own files betraying him. His allies compromised, communications intercepted, every move anticipated. "You underestimated me," I said, voice steady. and it cost you everything." He lunged, not physically, but through the system. A desperate attempt to regain control, but it was too late. Every move I had predicted, every contingency accounted for. His digital attacks deflected, traced, neutralized. Silence fell. Heavy, electric. The weight of weeks of fear, manipulation, and danger hung in the air. He stared at me, breathing heavily. Realization dawning. I had won, but victory was not without cost. I had seen the depths of his network, the reach of his manipulations, the lengths to which he would go to protect himself. And I knew this battle had changed me forever. Authorities arrived shortly after, guided by the digital evidence I had preserved. Arrests were made, his allies exposed. The network dismantled. Justice finally was served. I walked away from the hub, the city lights flickering against the night sky. The weight of the ordeal pressed on me, but relief, bitter and sharp, followed. I realized then that trust, once broken, can never truly be restored. But courage, precision, and perseverance can dismantle even the most intricate webs of deception. And as I disappeared into the shadows of the city, leaving the remnants of his empire behind, I knew one truth above all. Even the most meticulous plans collapse when faced with resolve. And sometimes, the hunter becomes the hunted.